The sun was shining brightly as Jamal Harris steered his delivery van into the upscale neighborhood of Maple Ridge. It was a place where the streets were immaculate, the lawns perfectly manicured, and the houses looked more like palaces than homes. Jamal had been here many times before, but every time he entered this world of luxury, he couldn't help but feel a certain tension in the air. It wasn't the neighborhood itself. No, it was the people who lived here. The way they looked at him, the assumptions they made the moment they saw his brown skin and simple delivery uniform. Today, his destination was the Whitman residence, one of the grandest mansions in Maple Ridge. The Whitmans were well known in the area, not just for their wealth, but also for their arrogance. Claire and Robert Whitman were the type of people who believed their money made them better than everyone else, and they never missed an opportunity to remind others of their place. Jamal parked his van in front of the towering gates and took a deep breath before stepping out. He knew what to expect, but he also knew he had a job to do. He grabbed the first of the grocery bags, luxury items that only the wealthy could afford, and made his way to the front door. The doorbell echoed through the house, and after a few moments, the heavy wooden door swung open. Claire Whitman stood there, her icy blue eyes narrowing as they landed on Jamal. She was dressed in designer clothes, her blonde hair perfectly styled, but there was a coldness to her that no amount of wealth could hide. "What do you want?" she snapped, not even giving him a chance to speak. Jamal remained calm, his voice polite and professional. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here with your grocery delivery." Claire's eyes flicked to the bags in his hands, and she frowned, her lips pursed in disapproval. "You're supposed to go around to the back entrance," she said sharply. "We don't use the front door for deliveries." Jamal hesitated for a moment. The back entrance was further away, and carrying all the bags around would take extra time and effort. He knew the layout of the house from previous deliveries and that the front entrance was the most efficient way to bring in the groceries. But he also knew arguing wouldn't do him any favors. "Ma'am, the bags are heavy, and it would be quicker to bring them in through the front," he explained, trying to keep his tone even. Claire's expression hardened. "I said use the back entrance," she repeated, her voice dripping with condescension. "Or do you not understand how things work around here?" Jamal bit back his frustration. He had dealt with worse, and he wasn't about to let her get under his skin. "Of course, ma'am," he said simply. "I'll take them around the back." He turned to head back to the van, but before he could take a step, Robert Whitman appeared in the doorway. He was tall and imposing, his presence commanding the space around him. Like his wife, he had an air of superiority that was impossible to ignore. "What's the problem here?" Robert demanded, his eyes scanning Jamal with a look of disdain. "No problem, sir," Jamal replied. "I was just explaining that it would be quicker to bring the groceries in through the front entrance, but I'll take them around the back as requested." Robert's lips curled into a sneer. "Listen, we don't need some delivery guy telling us what's quicker. You do as you're told, understand?" Jamal nodded, swallowing his pride. "Yes, sir." Robert grunted in satisfaction and stepped aside, allowing Jamal to continue his work. Jamal turned and made his way back to the van, loading up the bags once more before heading around to the back of the house. The entire time, he kept his focus on the task at hand, refusing to let the Whitman's treatment get to him. As he approached the back entrance, he couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between the pristine front of the house and the less polished back. It was as if the Whitmans only cared about what others could see, while everything else was neglected. It was a small detail, but it spoke volumes about their character. Jamal knocked on the back door, and a housekeeper opened it, her expression neutral as she stepped aside to let him in. Unlike the Whitmans, she didn't say a word, simply pointing to where he should place the groceries. Jamal appreciated her silence. It made the task easier. Once all the bags were inside, Jamal straightened up and wiped the sweat from his brow. The job was done, but as he turned to leave, the housekeeper handed him a small envelope. He opened it, expecting a tip, perhaps a small token of appreciation for his work, but instead he found a note, hastily written in Claire's neat handwriting. It read, "Next time, follow instructions and don't argue. No tip this time." Jamal stared at the note, the words blurring slightly as his emotions churned. He folded it and slipped it into his pocket, his face betraying nothing. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. But no matter how many times he faced such treatment, it still stung. As he walked back to his van, Jamal couldn't help but think about the way people like the Whitmans saw him. To them, he was just a delivery man, someone who existed to serve them and nothing more. They didn't know or care about his story, his struggles, or his successes. All they saw was his uniform and the color of his skin. But Jamal knew who he was. He knew the hard work it took to build his company from the ground up, and he knew the value of treating others with respect, no matter their station in life. He climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, the rumble of the van comforting in its familiarity. As he pulled away from the Whitmans' mansion, Jamal made a silent promise to himself. No matter how they treated him, he would never let them define his worth. And someday, they would see the truth, whether they wanted to or not. Jamal drove through the winding streets of Maple Ridge, the opulent homes fading into the distance as he made his way back to the city. The Whitmans' mansion had been the last delivery of the day, and as he navigated the familiar roads, his thoughts drifted to the note Claire had left for him. He had encountered plenty of people like the Whitmans over the years. People who believed their wealth entitled them to treat others with disdain. It wasn't new, but it was exhausting. As Jamal approached the bridge that separated Maple Ridge from the rest of the city, his phone buzzed in the cup holder beside him. He glanced down at the screen to see a notification from his assistant, Melissa. She had been with him since the early days of the company and knew the ins and outs of the business as well as he did. The message read, "Just received a complaint from a client named Whitman. They're asking for a different delivery person next time. Want me to handle it?" Jamal sighed, shaking his head slightly as he read the message. The Whitmans were nothing if not predictable. He tapped out a quick response. "I'll take care of it. Thanks, Melissa." He knew he needed to address the complaint personally. It wasn't just about smoothing things over with a difficult client. It was about maintaining the reputation of his company. Jamal had worked too hard to build his business to let one bad interaction tarnish its image. And besides, he had a feeling that this situation might require more than a standard customer service response. As he pulled into the parking lot of the company's headquarters, a modest building in a bustling part of the city, Jamal felt a sense of calm wash over him. This was his domain, a place where he was in control and respected for his hard work and leadership. The office might not have the glitz and glamour of the homes in Maple Ridge, but it was a symbol of everything he had achieved through perseverance and dedication. Jamal parked the van and grabbed his bag, making his way inside. The office was quiet, most of the staff having already left for the day, but Melissa was still at her desk, typing away on her keyboard. She looked up as he entered, offering him a warm smile. "Long day?" she asked, her tone sympathetic. "You could say that," Jamal replied, returning her smile. "I just got back from the Whitmans. Looks like they weren't too happy with the delivery." Melissa rolled her eyes. "They're never happy with anything. I've seen their name come up in the complaint log more times than I can count," Jamal chuckled. "Yeah, they're a tough crowd, but I'll handle it." He walked over to his office, a small but comfortable space with a window that overlooked the city. As he settled into his chair, he pulled out his phone and composed an email to the Whitmans, carefully choosing his words to be both professional and conciliatory. Subject: Your recent delivery experience. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Whitman, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to personally reach out to address your recent delivery experience and any concerns you may have had. At Harris Delivery Services, we strive to provide the highest level of service to all our clients, and I apologize if your experience did not meet those standards. Please know that your feedback is taken seriously, and I will personally ensure that your next delivery is handled with the utmost care and attention. Should you have any specific requests or preferences, please feel free to share them, and we will do our best to accommodate them. Thank you for your continued business, and I look forward to resolving this matter to your satisfaction. Best regards, Jamal Harris, CEO, Harris Delivery Services. Jamal read over the email twice before hitting send. He knew it was important to remain professional, even when dealing with difficult clients. But he also knew that this was just the beginning. The Whitmans were the type of people who expected perfection, and anything less was unacceptable in their eyes. It wasn't enough to simply apologize. He needed to go above and beyond to ensure they were satisfied. As the email sent, Jamal leaned back in his chair, his mind drifting to the upcoming days. He knew the Whitmans had a big event planned for the weekend, a lavish party that required another large delivery. They had specifically requested a different delivery person, but Jamal had already decided that he would be the one to handle it. He needed to confront the situation head-on and, if necessary, reveal his true identity. The thought of revealing himself as the owner and CEO of the company was something Jamal rarely considered. He preferred to stay under the radar, working alongside his employees and seeing firsthand how his business operated on the ground level. It was this hands-on approach that had made Harris Delivery Services so successful, but it also meant that most clients didn't know who he really was. But in this case, Jamal felt that it might be necessary. The Whitmans needed to understand that respect was a two-way street, and sometimes the best way to teach that lesson was through a bit of humility. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city, Jamal made his decision. He would take the Whitmans' order himself, dressed not in his usual delivery uniform, but in a suit, a subtle but powerful statement. And when the time came, he would reveal his true identity, not to boast, but to make a point. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Jamal prepared for the upcoming delivery. He made sure everything was in order, from the packing of the groceries to the delivery schedule. His team, unaware of the full details, simply followed his lead, trusting in his judgment, as they always did. Finally, the day of the delivery arrived. Jamal dressed carefully, choosing a tailored suit that conveyed both authority and approachability. He looked in the mirror, adjusting his tie and making sure everything was perfect. Today was going to be a turning point, not just for the Whitmans, but for Jamal as well. He drove the van himself, the familiar route to Maple Ridge now filled with a sense of anticipation. As he approached the Whitman mansion, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. This time, things would be different. Jamal parked the van and stepped out, the late afternoon sun glinting off the polished exterior of the mansion. He walked up to the front door, carrying the first of the grocery bags, and rang the bell. The sound echoed inside, and after a moment the door swung open. Claire Whitman stood there, her expression one of surprise as she took in Jamal's appearance. This wasn't the delivery man she was expecting, not by a long shot. But before she could say anything, Jamal spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitman. I'm here with your delivery." Jamal stood at the Whitmans' front door, the grocery bag in his hand and a calm, collected expression on his face. Claire Whitman's surprise was palpable as she took in the sight of him. Gone was the simple delivery uniform. Instead, Jamal wore a tailored suit that seemed out of place for someone delivering groceries. Claire blinked, momentarily thrown off balance, but quickly recovered, her haughty demeanor returning as she crossed her arms and tilted her head in suspicion. "Didn't we request someone else for this delivery?" she asked sharply, her voice carrying a note of irritation. Jamal maintained his composure, nodding slightly. "Yes, Mrs. Whitman, you did, but I wanted to personally ensure that your delivery was handled to your satisfaction. I'm here to make sure everything is perfect." Claire eyed him warily, still trying to process the situation. Before she could respond, Robert Whitman appeared behind her, his eyes narrowing as he spotted Jamal. His expression quickly mirrored his wife's, a mixture of annoyance and disdain. "What's going on here? I thought we made it clear we didn't want him delivering to us again," Robert said, his tone sharp as he looked Jamal up and down. Jamal met Robert's gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Whitman, and I assure you I'm here to address them. Your satisfaction is my top priority," Robert scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "Is that so? Well, you've got a lot of nerve showing up here after the way you argued with us last time. We expect our instructions to be followed, not questioned." Claire chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "And what's with the suit? Are you trying to impress us? Because it's not working." Jamal remained calm, his voice steady as he replied, "I'm not here to impress anyone, Mrs. Whitman. I'm here to make sure you receive the service you deserve." The tension between them was thick, the air practically crackling with the unspoken resentment. Jamal could see the disdain in their eyes, the way they looked at him as if he were beneath them, unworthy of their time or respect. But he had come prepared for this, knowing that the Whitmans would push back against any attempt to hold them accountable for their behavior. As he stood there, holding the grocery bag, Jamal could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was more than just a delivery. This was a test of his resolve, a challenge to see if he would back down or stand his ground. He knew that revealing his true identity now could change the entire dynamic of the situation, but he also knew that timing was everything. Before Jamal could say anything more, Claire let out a dismissive sigh. "Just leave the groceries in the kitchen and get out. We have guests arriving soon, and we don't have time for this." Jamal nodded, his expression unreadable as he stepped inside. The mansion's interior was as lavish as one would expect, with gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and expensive artwork adorning the walls. It was the epitome of wealth and privilege, a stark contrast to the modest office where Jamal spent most of his days. He made his way to the kitchen, carefully placing the bags on the counter, all the while feeling the Whitman's eyes on his back. He could sense their impatience, their desire to be rid of him as quickly as possible. But Jamal wasn't in a hurry. He knew that the longer he stayed, the more uncomfortable they would become, and that was exactly what he intended. Once the groceries were neatly arranged, Jamal turned to face the Whitmans, who had followed him into the kitchen. Claire was already reaching for her phone, likely to check the time and make sure everything was on schedule for their party. Robert, however, was watching Jamal with a look of barely concealed contempt. "Is there anything else I can assist you with?" Jamal asked, his voice polite but firm. Claire didn't even look up from her phone as she replied, "No, that will be all. You can go now." Jamal nodded again, but instead of leaving, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. The simple white card had his name printed on it, along with the title, CEO, Harris Delivery Services, in bold letters. He held it out to Robert, who hesitated for a moment before taking it, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion. "What's this supposed to be?" Robert asked, his tone tinged with suspicion. Jamal met his gaze steadily. "It's my business card. I thought it might be helpful for you to know who you've been speaking to." Robert stared at the card, his eyes widening as the realization dawned on him. He looked up at Jamal, his mouth opening and closing as if he were struggling to find the right words. Claire, noticing her husband's reaction, finally looked up from her phone and saw the card in his hand. Her eyes flicked to Jamal, and for the first time she seemed to be at a loss for words. "You're the CEO?" Robert finally managed to ask, his voice incredulous. Jamal nodded, his expression calm but resolute. "Yes, I am. I started this company several years ago, and I've worked hard to build it into what it is today. I take a hands-on approach because I believe in understanding every aspect of my business, from the ground up. That's why I'm here delivering your groceries." The Whitmans were stunned into silence, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy in the air. The power dynamic that had once seemed so clear, wealthy clients versus a lowly delivery man, had been completely upended. Now, it was the Whitmans who were left scrambling to make sense of the situation, their arrogance suddenly seeming hollow in the face of Jamal's calm confidence. Jamal continued, his voice measured but firm. "I understand that you have high expectations, and I'm committed to meeting them. But I also believe in mutual respect. I'm not just a delivery man. I'm the owner of this company, and I expect to be treated with the same respect that I show to you." Robert's face flushed with embarrassment, his earlier bravado nowhere to be seen. He looked at Claire, who was still holding her phone, her expression frozen in shock. For a moment, it seemed as if neither of them knew how to respond, the reality of their mistake sinking in. Claire was the first to recover, her voice shaky as she attempted to salvage the situation. "Mr. Harris, I didn't realize, we didn't know. Jamal raised a hand, cutting her off gently. There's no need for apologies, Mrs. Whitman. I'm not here to make you feel uncomfortable. I just wanted to make sure you understand who I am and why I'm here. We all have a job to do, and I take mine very seriously. The Whitmans exchanged a glance, their earlier confidence completely shattered. Jamal could see the gears turning in their minds, the realization that they had misjudged him, that their assumptions had led them to treat him in a way they would never have considered if they had known the truth. But Jamal wasn't interested in their apologies or excuses. He had made his point, and that was enough. Without another word, he turned and headed for the door, leaving the Whitmans standing in their opulent kitchen, the business card still clutched in Robert's hand. As Jamal walked out of the mansion, the weight of the confrontation lifted from his shoulders. He had done what he came to do, and now it was up to the Whitmans to decide how they would respond. He had no interest in seeing them grovel or beg for forgiveness. That wasn't his style. All he wanted was for them to understand that respect wasn't something that could be bought or demanded. It was something that had to be earned, no matter who you were or how much money you had. Jamal got back into his van, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. As he drove away from the Whitmans' mansion, he felt a sense of satisfaction that went beyond just another successful delivery. This was about more than groceries. This was about standing up for himself and the values he had built his company on. The road stretched out before him, leading back to the city and the life he had worked so hard to build. And as he drove, Jamal knew that he would continue to face challenges like the one he had just overcome. But he also knew that as long as he stayed true to himself and his principles, there was nothing he couldn't handle. As Jamal drove back toward the city, the events at the Whitmans' mansion replayed in his mind. He had handled the situation exactly as he'd intended, revealing his true identity at the right moment to make a lasting impact. But now, as the adrenaline began to fade, he couldn't help but wonder how the Whitmans would react in the long run. Would they learn from this experience, or would they simply brush it off and continue treating others with the same disdain? These thoughts lingered as he pulled into the parking lot of his company's headquarters. The modest building stood in stark contrast to the grandeur of the Whitmans' mansion. But to Jamal, it was a symbol of everything he had achieved through hard work and perseverance. He parked the van and headed inside, eager to check in with his team and ensure that everything was running smoothly. Inside the office, the atmosphere was calm but focused, with employees working diligently at their desks. Melissa looked up from her computer as Jamal walked in, her expression curious. She had noticed the suit he was wearing when he left earlier, and now she was eager to hear how things had gone. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. Jamal offered her a reassuring smile. "It went as well as could be expected. I think I managed to get the point across." Melissa nodded, relieved. "Good. Those kinds of clients can be tough to deal with, but I'm glad you handled it personally." Jamal appreciated Melissa's support. She had been with him from the beginning, and her loyalty and dedication had been instrumental in the company's growth. He took a seat at his desk and began to review the day's reports, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the Whitmans. Despite the calm exterior he projected, the confrontation had left him with a lingering sense of unease. Just as he was about to dive into the next report, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code indicated it was local. Jamal hesitated for a moment before answering. "Jamal Harris speaking," he said, his tone professional. There was a brief pause on the other end before a voice spoke, filled with a mix of uncertainty and awkwardness. "Mr. Harris, this is Robert Whitman. I'm calling because, well, my wife and I wanted to talk to you about what happened earlier today." Jamal's heart rate quickened slightly, but he kept his voice steady. "Of course, Mr. Whitman. What can I do for you?" Robert cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "First, I want to apologize for the way we treated you earlier. We had no idea who you were, and that doesn't excuse our behavior, but I just wanted to say we're sorry." Jamal remained silent, allowing Robert to continue. He could sense the struggle in the man's voice, the difficulty he was having in admitting his fault. We've been thinking a lot about what you said, about respect, Robert went on, his voice growing more earnest. And it made us realize that we've been taking a lot of things for granted, especially the people who work for us or provide services to us. We want to do better, and we'd like to find a way to make it right. Jamal considered Robert's words carefully. It wasn't often that people in the Whitman's position made such admissions, and while it was clear that Robert was making an effort, Jamal couldn't help but wonder how sincere the gesture was. Still, he believed in giving people a chance to change. "I appreciate your apology, Mr. Whitman," Jamal replied, his tone measured. "It takes a lot to acknowledge when we've made mistakes, and I respect that. If you're serious about wanting to do better, I'm willing to work with you." There was a palpable sense of relief in Robert's voice as he responded. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. That means a lot to us. We'd like to discuss some ways we can support your business and make amends for what happened. Maybe we could start by setting up a meeting?" Jamal nodded, though Robert couldn't see it. "That sounds like a good idea. I'm open to any suggestions you might have, and I'm happy to share some of my own thoughts as well. Let's arrange a time to meet and talk things through." Robert agreed, and after a brief exchange of details, the call ended. Jamal set his phone down on the desk, his thoughts racing. He hadn't expected the Whitmans to reach out so quickly, and their willingness to make amends caught him off guard. But he also knew that actions spoke louder than words, and only time would tell if they were truly committed to changing their ways. The next few days passed quickly as Jamal focused on the daily operations of his company. But the upcoming meeting with the Whitmans remained on his mind. He knew that this was an opportunity not just for them, but for him as well. If handled correctly, it could lead to a positive outcome for everyone involved. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Jamal had prepared thoroughly, anticipating the kinds of questions and concerns the Whitmans might raise. He wanted to be ready for anything, but more importantly, he wanted to ensure that the conversation remained focused on the core issue, respect, and how it should be a fundamental part of any interaction, regardless of the circumstances. Jamal arrived at the Whitmans' mansion once again, this time as a guest rather than a delivery man. He was greeted at the door by a housekeeper who led him to a spacious sitting room where Claire and Robert were waiting. The room was elegantly furnished, with large windows that overlooked the meticulously landscaped gardens. It was clear that no expense had been spared in creating an atmosphere of luxury and comfort. Claire and Robert stood as Jamal entered, their expressions a mix of nervousness and contrition. Claire was the first to speak, her voice soft and sincere. "Mr. Harris, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We know we have a lot to make up for, and we appreciate your willingness to give us that chance." Jamal nodded, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Thank you for reaching out. I believe that change is possible if we're open to it, and I'm here to see how we can move forward together." They all took their seats, and Robert began by explaining how the events of the previous week had prompted a lot of reflection for both him and Claire. They had come to realize how their sense of entitlement had blinded them to the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. Robert admitted that they had been too focused on their own status and wealth, neglecting the humanity of those around them. Claire added that they had decided to make some changes, not just in how they treated the people they interacted with daily, but also in how they used their resources. She explained that they wanted to contribute to causes that supported equality and social justice, and they were hoping Jamal could guide them in choosing the right initiatives. Jamal listened carefully, his expression thoughtful as he considered their words. He could see that they were making an effort, but he also knew that true change would take time and consistency. Still, he was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. "I'm glad to hear that you're committed to making a difference," Jamal said finally. "It's important that these changes come from a genuine place, not just as a way to make up for past mistakes. I'm happy to help you find ways to contribute to the community, and I think it's also important that you continue to reflect on how you treat the people in your lives, no matter their role or status." Robert and Claire nodded in agreement, their expressions earnest. They spent the next hour discussing various initiatives and charities that aligned with the values Jamal believed in, as well as ways the Whitmans could support his business and other local enterprises that promoted equality and fairness. By the end of the meeting, there was a sense of mutual understanding and respect that hadn't been there before. The Whitmans had a long way to go, but they were taking the first steps toward becoming better people. And while Jamal remained cautious, he was also hopeful that their encounter would lead to lasting change. As he left the mansion for the second time, Jamal felt a sense of closure. The confrontation with the Whitmans had been difficult, but it had also opened the door to something positive. He knew that there would always be challenges and setbacks, but he was determined to continue leading his company with integrity and a commitment to treating everyone with the respect they deserved. The road ahead was uncertain, but Jamal was ready to face whatever came his way. With a renewed sense of purpose, he returned to his office, ready to tackle the next challenge and continue building a future he could be proud of. The weeks following Jamal's meeting with the Whitmans were filled with a quiet but steady transformation, not just for them but also for Jamal and his company. As word spread about what had happened, both among the wealthy circles of Maple Ridge and within the broader community, the story took on a life of its own. It became a tale of humility, respect, and the unexpected power dynamics that can shift when assumptions are challenged. Jamal continued to run Harris Delivery Services with the same dedication and integrity that had brought him success, but now there was a renewed sense of purpose in his work. He knew that the example he had set with the Whitmans could have a ripple effect, encouraging others to reconsider how they treated those who provided services or worked in positions often overlooked by society. One morning, as Jamal was going over some reports in his office, Melissa knocked on the door, her expression a mix of excitement and curiosity. "Jamal, you're going to want to see this," she said, holding out her tablet. She had a news article pulled up, and the headline caught Jamal's attention immediately. "Local CEO's Lesson in Respect Inspires Community Change." Jamal took the tablet from her, his brow furrowing slightly as he began to read. The article detailed the events at the Whitman mansion, painting a picture of how Jamal's revelation had not only stunned the wealthy couple, but also led to significant changes in their behavior. The Whitmans had begun supporting local charities focused on social justice, and they had made a public commitment to treating everyone they interacted with, regardless of their job, with respect and dignity. The article went on to describe how other residents of Maple Ridge had taken notice and were following suit. A small but growing movement was taking hold, encouraging people to rethink their attitudes toward service workers and those in less privileged positions. Jamal's actions had sparked a conversation that was spreading beyond the confines of the wealthy neighborhood. Melissa watched as Jamal read, her eyes twinkling with pride. "You've really made an impact, Jamal. People are talking about this all over the city." Jamal set the tablet down, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I didn't set out to make a public statement, but if it's helping people see things differently, then I'm glad." He couldn't deny the satisfaction he felt in knowing that his actions had led to something positive. But Jamal was also mindful of the fact that change was a process, and it would take more than just a few news articles to make a lasting difference. Over the next few weeks, Jamal focused on using this newfound attention to further his mission. He worked with his team to develop community outreach programs and initiatives aimed at promoting respect and equality. One of the first projects they launched was a mentorship program for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, providing them with opportunities to learn about entrepreneurship and business management. Jamal personally took on several mentees, sharing his own experiences and lessons learned from building his company from the ground up. He found great fulfillment in guiding these young people, helping them see that success wasn't just about money or status, but about hard work, integrity, and the way they treated others. One of his mentees, a bright and ambitious young woman named Tasha, reminded Jamal of himself when he was just starting out. Tasha had big dreams of one day owning her own business, but she faced many challenges, including financial struggles and a lack of support from her family. Jamal saw her potential and made it a point to help her navigate the obstacles in her path. As they worked together, Tasha opened up about her own experiences with discrimination and the way people often judged her based on her appearance or background. Jamal listened, offering advice and encouragement, but also sharing the hard truths about what it would take to succeed. "People are always going to make assumptions," Jamal told her one afternoon as they reviewed her business plan. "But it's how you respond to those assumptions that defines you. You have to be strong, and you have to believe in yourself, even when others don't." Tasha nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "I get that, Mr. Harris, and I'm ready to prove them all wrong." Jamal smiled, seeing in her the same fire that had driven him to push through the challenges he had faced. He knew that Tasha, like him, had the potential to turn those challenges into strengths, and he was proud to be a part of her journey. Meanwhile, the Whitmans continued to make strides in their own transformation. They became regular contributors to the local food bank, and Claire even began volunteering her time at a community center, helping to organize events and fundraisers for those in need. Robert, on the other hand, took a more hands-on approach within his own business, ensuring that all employees were treated fairly and with respect, regardless of their role. Jamal and the Whitmans maintained a cordial relationship, with occasional meetings to discuss the progress of their initiatives. While they were not friends in the traditional sense, there was a mutual respect that had grown out of their initial confrontation. The Whitmans had learned a valuable lesson, and Jamal had found an unexpected ally in his mission to promote equality and respect. As the year came to a close, Harris Delivery Services was thriving, not just as a business, but as a beacon of positive change within the community. Jamal's story continued to inspire others, and the impact of his actions could be seen in the small but meaningful shifts happening around the city. One day, as Jamal was locking up his office after a long day of work, he received a text message from Robert Whitman. It was a simple message, but it carried a lot of weight. "Thank you for helping us see the bigger picture. We're better people because of it." Jamal stared at the message for a moment, reflecting on how far they had all come since that fateful day at the Whitman mansion. He replied with a short but sincere message of his own. "I'm glad to hear that, Robert. Keep up the good work." As Jamal walked out of the office, the city lights twinkling in the distance, he felt a deep sense of contentment. He knew that the journey was far from over, and there would always be more work to do, more minds to change, and more lives to impact. But he was ready for whatever came next, confident that with each step forward, he was making the world a little better. And that, he realized, was the true measure of success. As the year progressed, Jamal's efforts began to bear fruit in ways he hadn't anticipated. The mentorship program he had started was flourishing, with more young people from diverse backgrounds joining and benefiting from the guidance and support provided by Jamal and his team. Tasha, in particular, had made significant strides, refining her business plan and securing a small loan to start her own venture. Jamal watched her progress with pride, knowing that she had the determination and grit to succeed. One afternoon, Tasha came by Jamal's office to share some exciting news. She had just signed the lease on a small storefront in the heart of the city, where she planned to open her own boutique selling handcrafted accessories. Jamal could see the excitement in her eyes, the same excitement he had felt when he first started his company. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mr. Harris," Tasha said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You believed in me when no one else did." Jamal smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "You did the hard work, Tasha. I just gave you a little push in the right direction. I'm proud of you." As Tasha left the office, Jamal couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed over the past few months. What had started as a difficult encounter with the Whitmans had grown into something much larger. A movement, a mission to change the way people thought about respect, dignity, and equality. And while there was still much work to be done, Jamal was heartened by the progress he had seen. But it wasn't just Jamal who had been affected by the events of the past year. The Whitmans had continued to evolve, becoming active participants in the community and using their influence to advocate for social change. Their journey had not been easy, and they still faced skepticism from some who doubted the sincerity of their transformation. But Jamal could see that their efforts were genuine, and he respected the work they were doing to make amends for their past behavior. One evening, Jamal received an invitation to an event the Whitmans were hosting at their mansion. It was a fundraiser for a local nonprofit that provided resources and support to underprivileged communities. The invitation was unexpected, but Jamal decided to attend, curious to see how the Whitmans had changed and how their event would reflect their new values. When Jamal arrived at the mansion, he was greeted by a different atmosphere than the one he had encountered during his previous visits. The lavish decorations were still there, but there was a warmth and openness to the event that hadn't been present before. The guests were diverse, representing a wide range of backgrounds and professions, and the focus was clearly on the cause they were supporting, rather than on the opulence of the setting. Claire and Robert greeted Jamal warmly, their expressions filled with a genuine sense of welcome. Claire introduced Jamal to several of the other guests, making sure to highlight his role as a mentor and community leader. It was clear that they had come a long way from the arrogant, entitled couple they had once been. As the evening progressed, Robert took the stage to address the guests. His speech was heartfelt, acknowledging the mistakes he and Claire had made in the past and expressing their commitment to making a positive impact going forward. He spoke about the importance of respect and humility, and how their encounter with Jamal had been a turning point in their lives. We were blind to our own privilege, and we failed to see the value in the people who make our lives easier, Robert said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But thanks to Mr. Harris, we've learned that true success isn't measured by wealth or status, but by the way we treat others. We're committed to using our resources to help those who need it most, and we're grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow. The audience responded with applause, and Jamal felt a swell of pride as he watched from his seat. The Whitmans' journey was a testament to the power of change and the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. After the speech, Claire and Robert sought out Jamal, their expressions sincere. "Thank you for coming, Jamal," Claire said, her voice warm. "It means a lot to us that you're here." Jamal nodded, offering a small smile. "I'm glad to see the work you're doing. It's important, and I'm proud of the progress you've made." Robert extended his hand, and Jamal shook it, feeling a sense of closure. The tension and animosity that had once existed between them had been replaced by mutual respect and a shared commitment to making the world a better place. As the event continued, Jamal mingled with the other guests, many of whom expressed admiration for the work he was doing in the community. He was approached by several people interested in supporting his initiatives, and by the end of the evening, he had secured new partnerships and resources that would help expand his programs even further. As he left the Whitman mansion that night, Jamal felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey had been challenging, filled with moments of doubt and frustration, but it had also been rewarding in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had learned that change was possible, even for those who seemed most resistant, and that his efforts could have a ripple effect, touching lives in ways he might never fully understand. Back at his office the next day, Jamal took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. He knew that the work was far from over, but he was ready to continue the journey, confident in the knowledge that he was making a difference. And as he looked out over the city, the sun shining brightly on the horizon, he knew that the future held endless possibilities. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jamal turned back to his desk, ready to tackle whatever came next. The road ahead was long, but he was determined to walk it with integrity, respect, and a commitment to making the world a better place, one step at a time.